Hey, what's going on, everyone? Nick Yuskevich here again with Daily Fantasy Winners. We got the next episode of Tee to Green here for you, and this is the Players Championship preview. It is a tournament located in Ponte Verde Beach, Florida. It's in the Jacksonville area, and let's just get into some details about the tournament. And I'll actually just start off by saying why I think this is one of the best tournaments of the year, and in my opinion, it's actually the best stroke play event of the year. It's as good as a major championship, and so I'll give you a couple reasons why, and it actually feeds into some details you want to know about the tournament from just understanding how this tournament works in a DFS perspective. But number one, this is known as the fifth major. It's pretty much, I think, for a couple reasons. Number one, it's at a good scheduling point. It's it's kind of the halfway point between the Masters and the U.S. Open, and then it's like a month in between the two events, and then you have like usually a month break between the U.S. Open and the Open Championship, and then a month break between the Open Championship and the PGA Championship, and then that kind of builds up to the FedEx Cup and then the Ryder Cup and President's Cup, depending the year. And so even if this tournament actually were to move back to March, like it probably will in a couple of years, and I think it should, quite frankly, and they put this maybe on the end of the Florida swing, it would be about a month out from the Masters. And so the scheduling, I think, will work out perfectly with this event one way or the other. But the second reason why I think it's the best tournament, it's easily the best tournament that's not considered technically one of the four majors, but probably should be a major championship, is that it actually has the best field of all the tournaments, and that includes the majors. A lot of the times, so basically the major championships and the Players Championship, they all have very similar qualifications, and from the top of the field and even the middle of the field, they'll take the top 50 of the official World Golf Rankings. They'll take a winner of a PGA Tour event within the last calendar year. They will usually, there's some other qualifications that are usually pretty similar to get some of the top players, but usually they get to a point where they fill out a little over half the field, and they need to start adding people in certain other qualifications, and this is where the tournaments start kind of differentiating on how they add people. And so where the Masters will take like past champions of like the Masters, and they could be people from like that won the Masters back in like the late 80s, and they basically have no chance of winning the tournament. Maybe they might make the cut, but that's probably about the best they're going to do. And then you'll see like the Masters also, but like the Open Championship and the U.S. Open, they're taking a lot of amateur players. You'll see in the PGA Championship, they take a lot of club professionals to fill it out, because they're the tournament known as the only tournament that actually has, they're the only major that has all pros. They don't have any amateurs at the PGA Championship. So so instead of the Players Championship inviting basically amateurs or, former tournament champs from like 20 plus years ago and things like that, what the Players Championship does is they will take the top 10 on the FedEx Cup points list automatically qualifies, but usually to fill out the bottom of the field, they have to go farther than that. So basically, the Players Championship will just add as many people as they need to on the FedEx Cup points list to fill out the 140-some person field each year. And so right now, so I don't know about like the second, but like, to fill out the field, instead of, like I said, taking like amateur players or club pros or something like that, they're going to take players that are maybe like 23rd on the FedEx Cup points list, who is having a very good season, but just maybe hasn't had, like a couple top fives, like some other players, to help them get inside the top 10 of the FedEx Cup points list, or maybe they're just outside the official golf rankings in the top 50. Maybe it's a player who's a rising star on the Web.com Tour who's having a very good PGA Tour season, but they weren't able to launch up the official World Golf Rankings enough just because they don't have enough prior experience and I don't know what the exact formulas of the official World Golf Rankings is, but I know, the more good history you have, the better to a certain extent. And so there's a lot of different ways like that. So a lot of the times you're getting a lot of the better players in the game today who would not be able to make a major championship, but would be able to be in this tournament, replacing some of those kind of bottom feeders, if you will, at the majors. Okay, so that's kind of why it is the strongest field from top to bottom. And this is one of my favorite tournaments just from a DFS standpoint. You've got a bunch of eagle opportunities out there. You've got penalty strokes with all the water hazards. This is the tournament with the famous island green in the par 3 17th. There's water on nearly every hole. And so and every year it seems like we have a very close finish. Jason Day won by a couple shots or a few shots last year, which was a slight outlier. But usually every single year, this tournament comes right down to the wire and we're going to a playoff or it's going to be like a one-shot victory. That's very much often the case. And so, and then the last thing I will mention about details of the tournament before I get into the golf course is the winning score here usually every year is about between 12 and 15, 12 and 16 under par. It's usually pretty scoreable just because the par 5s are all pretty scoreable and you can make eagles and everything like that. But there are definitely a lot of bogeys and double bogeys out there as well. So it's not like it's not a cakewalk by any means of the imagination. And if you're wondering what the cut usually is each year, it's usually about even par. I think it was 1 under last year, but it's usually around that even par range of where the cut usually is. So a very fair test, but a very entertaining test as well. And so, and usually the weather's been pretty consistent here every year. It's been nice weather down in Florida and everything like that. And I think this year should be no exception to that. So, all right. Let's move on to details about the golf course. This is a TPC Sawgrass. It is specifically the stadium course at Sawgrass. This is one of the nicest public courses in the United States. Golf Digest usually has it as one of their top courses you can play on in the U.S. And so maybe some people who are listening to this have been fortunate enough to play it. I've not played it, but it is very nice, and I know a couple of people that have, and they said it's worth every penny. So, in any case, it's a par 72, tips out at 7,215 yards. So 7,215 yards for par 72, not very long. It's pretty middle of the road distance, maybe even slightly short for a par 72 by PGA Tour standards. It is a peak die design, which usually means target golf, and there's definitely some target philosophies out there on this golf course, but at the same time it does allow for some creativity at certain points as well, and so there's definitely going to be a little bit of a premium on accuracy, which I will get into in the strategy portion of this video here in just a little bit. And so, like I said, there's water on every hole, and it comes into play on nearly every hole. I can't say the water will be in play on every single time you tee it up and everything, or you're on your approach shot, but you will definitely see water on every hole, and it will come into play on, I'll just say, at least 2/3 of the holes, probably more like 3/4 of the holes, or like 80% of them, something like that. The par 5s, there are 4 par 5s, and there's actually a drivable par 4. It's always been drivable for a couple of the Bombers, but they actually remodeled the course at a few different points, and it's actually more drivable now, which I'll get into in a second. 4 par 5s, holes 2, 9, 11, and 16. 2, 11, and 16 are 532, 558, and 523. Those are all hittable in 2 by pretty much everybody, especially 2 and 16. You will see about, it depends on the year, but you will see usually about a dozen eagles on 16, maybe about 10 eagles on number 2, and then on 11 you'll see like 8 to 10 eagles. And we see them come from players of all kinds of driving distances. Usually they're not from the shortest hitters, but you want to at least be a medium length hitter, I think, usually to get the eagles. But we've seen some good course history here from some of the shorter hitters as well, and they have been able to post some eagles. So it's not like it's not a massive advantage for longer hitters on eagles on this golf course at all. The 2 holes where length will help a little bit is number 9. That's 583. Not so much for the tee shot, but for the second shot, just because the Bombers cannot hit driver on that hole because there's a creek that runs through the middle of the fairway, and if you're a Bomber off the tee, you can usually hit your 3-wood or your utility clubs longer than some of the other hitters, and so that will be necessary on your second shot to hit up to this like long but narrowish green that's kind of up on a weird little slope, and it's got a bunker that winds around the left-hand side and a big tree. It's a really cool hole, but there's only going to be a few eagles on that hole, but that'll definitely be from longer hitters. And then number 12 is the short par 4 that they've remodeled a little bit. And essentially they took away some of the mounds and they added water down the left-hand side, and it's more of a flat hole now. And they added some water and took away some of the mounds in other places on the golf course too. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to matter. It's not going to change anything too much from a strategy standpoint. The only thing is it will make Bombers slightly, and I really emphasize the word slightly, more important on the par 5s, just because we're a little unsure how many eagles will really be made on number 12. I'm going to guess it'll be about a handful. We'll see about 5 more eagles to the Bombers. That's probably about it. And we'll see significantly more eagles than that, obviously, throughout the whole entire tournament. So again, like I said, not a huge deal, but It is a tiny bit, I guess. Let's just get on into the strategy now. So ran the statistical stuff, and so strokes gained tee to green. It pretty much always pops up in every tournament, but some tournaments pop up more than others, and so I'm making the point now, strokes gained tee to green certainly pops up at this tournament. And of strokes gained tee to green between off the tee and approaching the green shows up here more than off the tee, which actually shocked me or I shouldn't say it shocked me, it surprised me a little bit, but I just thought they'd both be equally important, but it actually is approaching the green that's certainly more important than off the tee here. And so those are the two things you could look at there in the strokes gained department. Driving accuracy does show up here, and I actually need to elaborate on this a little bit. You're going to find certain players who have been historically great drivers of the golf ball from an accuracy standpoint who have good course history here, and that makes perfect sense on why they'd have good course history here, because they're avoiding penalty strokes. But there are cases where certain bombers really know how to play this course well, where they'll just never hit driver. Perfect example of this was last year. Jason Day won the tournament, and Justin Thomas also finished very closely near the top. I think it was last year that JT did this. It was last year 2 years ago. Now I'm actually drawing a blank on that, but it was one or the other. Anyways, Jason Day and Justin Thomas, two bombers. Jason Day actually usually has at least okay or decent at driving accuracy. Has not been as good lately, obviously, but Justin Thomas's driving accuracy usually isn't very good, who's a bomber. But what I could only say what Jason did, I think Justin did in a very similar manner, is Jason Day teed off with 2-iron on almost every golf hole. And he could literally just rip this 2-iron nearly 300 yards because he's that freaking strong. It is a nice gift to have. But yeah, that's what he was doing at the tournament, just so he could hit the fairways. And he would still be able to have, short irons and wedges into a lot of the holes. And so, he still had eagle potential and all of that. And so, there is a way, because driving accuracy is a little bit of a tricky thing, just in that it takes all your tee shots on non-par threes. And so if you have a guy that has really bad driving accuracy because he's hitting driver a lot, but he's playing on golf courses that don't really require driving accuracy, then when he gets to a course when there's driving accuracy that's required, he may actually know how to beat it and just not hit driver as much and have a really good long iron or fairway wood game or utility club game or something like that. And so but it's just, this is my long-winded way of saying you should focus a little bit on driving accuracy, but do not just eliminate bombers completely, and you should know some tidbits about like Jason Day and Justin Thomas that they know kind of how to kind of get around the golf course, and they're good long iron players and things like that. So, the last thing I was going to add is what kind of a lineup strategy I would do here as far as building lineups. So I would try to lean a little more with a balanced salary method as much as you can. This is a very strong field. However, having said that, when you get below the upper 6,000 range, on DraftKings, you were only going down to 6,500 this week. There's really nobody that I see off the top of my head that I've done on my initial research so far of around 6,500 that I would really like to play that much. There's maybe one or two in that like upper 6K range or maybe like 66, 6,700. There's a couple guys I'm like, yeah, I could see that. Maybe throw them in there a little bit in GPPs. But like for the most part, I think you want to go with balanced salary method here. And the reasoning why here is, and I'm going to get into this a little bit deeper with the picks, but it's just to say I think there's great value in the 9K and the 8K range this week, and I don't think the edge for the very top players in the game is as big in a tournament like this as opposed to a tournament like, the U.S. Open or the Masters or something like that. And I will get into that why in just a second here when I explain some of the top guys here in the pick strategy. So yeah, a little bit more of a balanced salary method is what I would do, though for probably for cash and GPP. I mean, GPP obviously you want that's different because depending on what kind of a structure you want to do, and it's based on ownership and everything. But especially for cash lineups, I would look more balanced, and probably overall GPP wise, you want to go more balanced, but obviously at the same time you want to make sure you're not, if you're making several GPPs, you don't want to be fading the top players. That's kind of crazy. For weather seems good, and so it usually does here every year. I'm recording this on a Tuesday afternoon, and there's a potential for a slight edge for Thursday afternoon, Friday morning, and the only reasoning for that is the winds on Friday afternoon are going to be potentially up to 15 miles an hour that I see as of now. On Thursday, it seems like all day it's going to be like 5 to 10 miles an hour. Friday morning is going to be 5 to 10 miles an hour, but then Friday afternoon it could go like 10 to 15. I mean, look, we're a few days out, and the fact that we're judging a Friday, not a Thursday, hurts a little bit as well. But at the same time, is it a little bit of an edge? Here's the deal. It's not that big of an edge or difference between 5 to 10 and 10 to 15. But when you get on a golf course that has a ton of water, it can mean more at a course like this than a course where, strokes gained approaching the green and avoiding penalty strokes isn't as big of a deal. So this is something I would definitely say keep an eye on and check back in on Wednesday into the forum, or, check, whatever weather people you want to use, and see, kind of look for maybe some advice in that sense, or just keep an eye on it. And if you see a pretty clear advantage one way or the other, I would definitely lean in that tee time advantage, because higher winds will matter here. 5 to 10, 10 to 15, not a huge deal, but if it's more than that, then I think that really is a big deal. So that's where we're at for weather, but it looks good other than that, sunshine and all that stuff. Okay, on to the picks. Okay, so I'm going to actually just dive into the 5 guys that are $10,000 and above. Spend a tiny bit of time on each one. Recommend a couple guys below that, and then that'll be it for the video. So there's Dustin Johnson at 12K. There's Rory at 11.2. Spieth at 10.8. Sergio at 10.2. And Jason Day at 10,000. I'm going to rank these from my least favorite to my favorites. So starting with the least favorite is Jordan Spieth. I would never place. Actually, let me rephrase this. Could Jordan Spieth win on a Florida course? Yes, he could. But let me put it this way: I would not recommend Jordan as my top play on any Florida golf course, because his driving accuracy has never been the strong part of his game. He is not usually. He's had one decent finish here, I believe it is, at the Players, but driving accuracy usually is not his thing. His odds of missing the cut are much greater than guys like Dustin and Rory and even Sergio, I actually think, for this tournament. It's just because of the driving accuracy element of it. That's that simple. I recognize that Jordan Spieth is number 1 strokes gained approaching the green, and his iron play has been awesome this year. But again, like I said, the driving thing, it's a kind of a big risk, and I will be really surprised if he can avoid the big mistake or a couple of those double bogeys for the entire 72 hole stretch. And so Jordan would be the 5th guy I would recommend of the top 5. The 4th person would be Jason Day. I know he's the defending champion. It's not like he's getting a ton of buzz right now just because he's been going through the personal stuff with his mother, obviously, battling cancer and everything like that. But that's really not why I'm not recommending him. It's more I'm not so high on him this year, just in the standpoint of his strokes gained approaching the green has been pretty bad this year. His strokes gained putting has been terrible as well. That I expect positive regression in, just because he is one of the best putters on tour, and that can have variance in it. But the strokes gained approaching the green definitely concerns me for this tournament. And so I do trust that maybe he could hit 2 irons still and rip it down the middle. But if his strokes gained approaching the green isn't sharp, and he can't really use his length to abuse the golf course, since driving accuracy matters on this course, I just don't really see what the huge advantage is to picking Jason Day in this tournament, especially when his form is not exactly perfect right now. But I will just say $10,000, pretty cheap for a guy of that skill. He'll probably have low ownership again. Definitely worth a play in GPPs. Even though he's the defending champ, I don't think he'll get a ton of ownership. I think there's enough guys like below him, John Rahm, Ricky Fowler, that get more buzz, and certainly Dustin and Roy will get more buzz. And so I think his ownership won't be that high. So throw him in some GPPs, but would not play him too much. The 3rd guy I'd recommend is Sergio Garcia. Sergio's 10.2, which is pretty expensive. Definitely a bump for him price-wise in comparison to where he's been in the past, and obviously his Masters win has something to do with that. But here's the truth of the matter. This not only is Sergio a defending champion here, he fits this golf course extremely well. He has a very good course history here because he is one of the best ball strikers on tour. So he's a longer hitter, but he's also a very accurate hitter, and he's been very accurate this year. So Sergio is a perfect fit. That's all great. The only reason why I'm saying he's 3rd on this list is just because it's a slightly expensive for him. 10.2 is kind of on the high side. And I would also just say, is there a Masters hangover? it's possible. Some people handle it better than others. I would think Sergio at this point would be able to handle this better, despite this being his first major championship win. I'll just put it this way: I will be shocked if Sergio misses the cut. But I will say though that there is the slight potential for a little bit of a hangover, just not quite as sharp, and it's just slightly on the expensive side. So that's why I have him at third. And then as far as the last two, there's Dustin and Rory. I would say Dustin is second and Rory is first for me. The reason why I have Dustin at second is because, one, he is the most expensive. He's $800 more than Rory, which I just don't necessarily agree with, even despite how great Dustin's form is. And I recognize Dustin's on an insane tear. But Dustin is also going to play better on golf courses where he can take advantage of his length and hit driver a lot of the time. You can't really do that at Sawgrass very well. So, Dustin doesn't really have Dustin doesn't have any holes in his game, but his biggest strength still is his driving distance. And so if Dustin was around the same price as Rory and Jordan or something like that, then I would say, okay, Rory and Dustin flip a coin here, type of a thing. But given that a lot of people are going to play Dustin Johnson, he can't really utilize the length to his advantage. I'm just going to say that Dustin's a slight step behind Rory. Rory's number one for me, just mainly because Rory does play Florida courses a little bit better than you might think, I guess, if you do some Florida research on Rory. And so I really like Rory. He's been awesome when he has played, and he's been very close. He just hasn't quite put together a perfect 72 holes, but I think this is a great opportunity for him to do so. And let's just see. There's a couple other guys I wanted to recommend, and ironically, they are former champs, and that really wasn't my intent when I was researching this. But the two guys I like below this are Ricky Fowler at 9,300. His odds per dollar are fantastic, and I know, like I said, he won here a couple of years ago. But again, very similar to Sergio, a longer hitter, but also a very accurate hitter. He is a very good ball striker, and he is in terrific form as well. And then the last guy I would throw into this, just because it's a very reasonable price, and odds per dollar is pretty good, but again, at the same time, I don't think it's going to be too insane his ownership will be, and that is Adam Scott at 8,400. Again, a former champ, but again, very good player, very good tee to green, very good approaching the green, slightly down in the statistical categories this year, but it's not terrible, and with that price at 8,400, it's a no-brainer. He should be at least low 9K range. He should be priced where Justin Rose is and Justin Thomas is at least, or something like that, and he should be above where Henrik Stenson has given Stenson's form this year. And so I'll have the usual lists up on DailyFantasyWinners.com. Up throughout the day on Wednesday, and hopefully this should be happening later. Like I said, I'm recording this on a Tuesday afternoon. Tuesday night, I'm going to be doing a golf video with Max, actually, and so we'll kind of do two parts of the, he'll be joining me for the second part, I guess, of the Players' Championship, if you will, or we're going to be doing kind of a second Players' Championship video aside from this, whatever you want to call it. And so hopefully you'll check into that, and hopefully we get these videos up posted here momentarily. And so thank you for watching. That is the end of this video. Please remember to like and subscribe to our Twitch and or to our YouTube channels. And then I'm at Nick Yuskevich on Twitter, and Daily Fantasy Winners is on Twitter at DFantasyWinners. All right, everyone, good luck.